There are places where silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything that has been lost. High in the mountains, where the wind carries dust and memory, the snow covers the bones of forgotten homes. There, the world seems to breathe slower, as if time itself has grown tired of remembering. And in that white, endless stillness, a boy walks alone. He is small against the horizon, a shadow moving through the wind, wrapped in a coat too thin for winter. His steps crunch faintly in the snow, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the cold. On his back, he carries a satchel made of rough cloth, torn at the edges, tied with rope. It holds almost nothing: a crust of bread, a rusted tin cup, and a photograph folded so many times the faces have begun to fade. The sky above him is heavy with gray, like a ceiling of stone. A single crow circles overhead, calling once before disappearing into the mist. He watches it go, his eyes half closed against the wind. Then he lowers his gaze to the trail ahead, a narrow line between what once was a village and what remains only in memory. The boy's name is Elias, though the world no longer knows it. He has learned to keep his name inside, like a candle flame cupped in trembling hands. Once, people had called out to him: his mother from the doorway, his father from the field, his sister laughing by the river. That was before the sky burned, before voices turned to echoes, before hope became something you had to dig for beneath the ashes. Now, even the echoes have gone quiet. He passes a signpost leaning sideways, half buried in snow. The letters have faded, but he traces them with his fingers anyway, as if the act itself might call life back into them. His gloves are mismatched, one wool, one leather, both too big for his hands. The cold bites through them easily. Still, he keeps walking. The wind rises. It whistles through the hollow frames of houses, playing broken shutters like instruments. Somewhere, a door bangs in the distance, rhythmic and hollow, a lonely heartbeat in a dead village. The boy stops to listen. The sound reminds him of rain, of nights when he would fall asleep to the soft tapping of drops against the roof while his mother whispered prayers beside him. He closes his eyes, but the memory vanishes too quickly, like breath on glass. When he opens them again, the world feels larger, emptier. The snow glows faintly in the fading light, turning everything pale blue. The air smells of pine and smoke, faint traces of something once warm. He adjusts his satchel and keeps walking. Beneath his feet, something glints, a fragment of stained glass. He bends down, lifts it carefully. It's small, no bigger than his palm, but when he holds it up, the last light of the setting sun passes through, painting his face in color: red, green, gold. He remembers the chapel in his village, the songs, the candles, the stories of saints. He remembers kneeling beside his mother, her voice trembling but sure: "The Lord keeps what the world forgets." He closes his fingers around the shard and whispers the words again. They sound different now, more fragile but also truer. A gust of wind scatters snow into the air, wrapping around him like a veil. For a moment, he feels invisible, as though the world itself is holding him still, watching, waiting. And then, through the drifting white, he sees it, a shape rising from the slope ahead. Ruins. Tall stones and broken arches, half buried under years of snow and silence. The remains of a place built for prayer, or perhaps for hiding. Between two collapsed walls stands an ancient door, sealed with wax that glints faintly in the cold light. He does not approach yet. He only stares. Something about it draws him, though he cannot say why. It looks like every door in the world that was ever meant to be opened by the right heart at the right time. The wind hushes. Even the crow above has gone quiet. The snow begins to fall harder, each flake soft as ash. Elias presses the shard of glass to his chest and whispers to no one, "Maybe this is where the world begins again." Then he takes a slow step forward. If this story finds a home in your heart, if you believe that even in ruins, light still waits to be found, please subscribe and tell us where in the world you are listening from. It's our dream to reach 1,000 hearts who carry faith through the cold, who still believe that a single act of courage can change everything. Because somewhere behind every sealed door, hope is still breathing, waiting for someone small and brave to find it. The wind had softened by dawn. What was once a howl had become a low breath, sliding through the hollow bones of the valley. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, leaving behind a world sculpted in white and silver. Silent, untouched, as if creation itself had paused to pray. Elias walked carefully down the narrow slope. The snow crunched beneath his boots, shallow in some places, knee-deep in others. His breath came out in short, visible bursts. He moved slowly, scanning the horizon, not out of fear, but because he had learned that silence could hide both danger and beauty. Ahead lay what remained of the village. The roofs were gone, either burned or collapsed, but the stone walls still stood, defiant against the years. Windows gaped like missing eyes. Some walls leaned toward each other as if sharing secrets of the fire that had taken them. The smell of smoke still lingered, faint but stubborn, clinging to the stones like memory. Elias paused before a doorway half buried in snow. He brushed the frost from its frame with a gloved hand. The wood was scarred and blackened, yet when he leaned closer he could smell faint traces of something once sweet: resin, candle wax, and thyme. Inside, the floor was covered with ashes, brittle and cold. In the corner, he found what remained of a chair and a metal pot, its handle twisted by heat. He touched it gently, then drew back, his fingertips gray with soot. Everywhere he looked, life had left behind its small, stubborn fingerprints. A rusted key nailed to a beam. A child's shoe, frozen stiff. A mirror cracked but still able to catch the faint outline of his face. He stared into it for a moment, seeing the boy he barely recognized. The hollow cheeks, the tired eyes, the dirt smudged across his skin. Yet behind the exhaustion, there was something else. The same quiet will that had kept him walking when there was nowhere left to go. Outside, the light began to change. Not warmer but clearer. The sun broke briefly through the clouds, touching the snow with gold. Elias stepped out and stood still, eyes closed. The warmth on his face was faint, but it was enough to make him breathe differently, deeper. For the first time in weeks, he whispered, "Thank you," though he wasn't sure who he was speaking to. As the light faded again, he walked toward the center of the ruins. There, he found what once might have been a square. A fountain stood in the middle, its stone basin cracked, the water inside frozen solid. Around it, half buried, were fragments of pottery, a metal spoon, a single boot with the laces missing. But what caught his eye was the tree that had grown in the center of it all, thin, fragile, yet impossibly alive. Its bark was pale gray, and its branches reached upward like arms in prayer. Elias reached out and touched it. The bark was cold, but beneath it, he felt life, faint, steady, pulsing. He smiled. The sound startled him. The act of smiling felt foreign, almost forbidden. But he couldn't help it. Something about that tree, that stubborn, beautiful defiance, reminded him of his mother's words. Even when the fire takes everything, roots remember. He sat beneath it for a while, listening to the wind move through the empty houses. The sound was strange, both mournful and kind. Every gust carried with it the faint chime of something unseen. Perhaps glass, perhaps memory. After a while, hunger brought him back to motion. He reached into his satchel, took out the last piece of bread, and broke it in half. He ate one piece and left the other at the tree's roots. "For whoever was here," he said softly. As he rose to leave, a sound broke through the quiet. Soft, tentative. A shuffle, a paw, a low whimper. Elias froze, turning toward the noise. Between two broken walls, a shape emerged, a dog thin as bone, with fur matted and one ear torn. It limped forward, eyes wide and cautious. Elias crouched slowly, extending his hand. "Hey there." His voice cracked from disuse. "It's all right." The dog stopped, sniffed the air, then backed away, growling faintly. Not in anger but fear. Elias didn't move. He reached into his coat, broke the remaining crumb of bread, and placed it gently on the ground. "Here. Take it. You need it more than I do." The animal hesitated, then limped closer. Its nose twitched. Slowly, it ate the bread, its eyes never leaving his. When it finished, it took one cautious step back, but didn't run. Something flickered in Elias's chest, the fragile warmth of being seen. He smiled again, whispering, "You can follow if you want." Then he turned toward the distant line of trees beyond the village, where smoke curled faintly between the branches. The dog watched for a moment, then began to follow. Not close, not yet, but enough. Together, they walked into the quiet heart of the valley. One boy, one stray, moving toward the place where the earth's breath grew colder, and where, waiting beneath the snow, a sealed door slept beneath centuries of dust and prayer. The morning came slow, pale, and breathless. A thin mist lingered above the snow like smoke that had forgotten its fire. The boy moved carefully between the trees, the dog padding behind him. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to trust. Every few steps, Elias would glance back, and the animal would pause, head tilted as if to say, "I'm here, but don't ask for too much yet." The wind had changed overnight. It no longer carried the sharp bite of mountain frost, but the gentler sound of branches whispering to one another. The forest seemed alive, watching, listening. Every creak of bark and flutter of snow felt like breath. Elias had never meant to keep the dog. But in the silence of this world, the simple rhythm of two sets of footsteps had become a comfort greater than words. He didn't speak much anymore. When he did, his voice felt strange in the air, as though it belonged to another time. But now he found himself whispering, if only to remind the trees, and himself, that he still existed. "Where did you come from?" he asked quietly. The dog trotted ahead, nose buried in the snow, tail low. It didn't answer, but Elias didn't expect it to. He smiled faintly and continued walking. By midday they reached a clearing, a space carved into the woods by fire long ago. The ground was uneven, littered with fallen logs and shards of charcoal, half covered by snow. In the center stood what remained of a cabin. Only part of the roof survived, caved in by time, but a wall still stood strong enough to block the wind. "This will do," Elias murmured. He set down his satchel and began to gather sticks. The dog watched, ears twitching. When Elias struck his flint and the first spark caught, the animal took a step forward, curiosity outweighing fear. The flame grew, small at first, then brighter, painting the boy's face with gold. The warmth stung his hands, half numb from the cold. He held them near the fire and closed his eyes. For a moment, he could almost feel his mother's presence, the way she used to rub his fingers between hers to bring the blood back after long days of work. He could almost smell her. Bread, soap, smoke, and something faintly floral. The memory was too tender to hold. He let it pass through him like a breath. When he opened his eyes, the dog was sitting a few feet away, head resting on its paws. Its ribs showed clearly through its fur, but its eyes were alive. Dark, deep, curious. Elias took a piece of the hard bread from his satchel and held it out. "Here," he said softly. "It's not much." The dog hesitated only a moment before crawling forward. It took the bread carefully from his hand, teeth brushing his fingers, then retreated to eat in silence. Elias smiled again, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the lips but warms the chest. "You're brave," he said. "You could have run. But you didn't." The dog looked up briefly, chewing, then lowered its head again. Elias laughed quietly, a sound that startled even him. It had been so long since laughter had felt natural. The wind stirred then, sweeping through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and ash. The fire crackled louder, throwing sparks into the air. Elias tilted his head back and watched them rise, tiny embers climbing toward a sky too wide to understand. He spoke softly, almost in prayer. "If you can still hear me, I'm not asking for much. Just one reason to keep walking." The forest didn't answer, but the wind gentled, circling him in a slow, deliberate motion, as if something unseen had brushed its hand through his hair. When the fire burned down, Elias lay on the ground near the wall. He pulled his coat tighter and closed his eyes. The dog curled up a short distance away, its breathing soft and rhythmic. For the first time in months, the sound of another living creature lulled him to sleep. He dreamed of light, not sunlight, but the kind that glows from within. A door stood before him, sealed with wax, pulsing faintly, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Behind it, he heard faint singing, a woman's voice low and warm, singing the lullaby he thought he had forgotten. He reached for the door, hand trembling, but before he could touch it, the sound faded into wind. When he woke, the world was gray again. The fire had gone out, and snowflakes had gathered lightly in his hair. The dog was gone. For a moment, Panic rose in his chest. Then he saw it. Tracks in the snow, small and wandering, leading toward the woods. "Hey," he called. His voice cracked. "Wait." He followed the tracks, slipping on the ice, calling again. The forest echoed back his voice. Soft, uncertain. Finally, he saw movement up ahead. The dog standing near a cluster of stones half buried in snow. It barked once, sharp, urgent, then looked back at him. "What is it?" Elias asked, breathing hard as he approached. The stones weren't random. They formed a shape, the outline of an old wall. He brushed the snow away, revealing carvings. Faint, eroded, but unmistakable. A cross surrounded by vines. It was the same mark he'd seen the day before. His breath caught. The dream, the door, the warmth. It all flooded back. The dog whined softly, circling the stones. Elias knelt beside them, pressing his hand to the carving. The stone was cold, but beneath it, he thought he felt something faint, a vibration like the heartbeat from his dream. He whispered, "What are you trying to show me?" The wind answered with a low, steady sigh. Snow began to fall again, covering the stones, the prints, everything but the mark itself. Elias turned to the dog, eyes wide. "We'll find it," he said. "The door. The one that's waiting." The dog wagged its tail once, then turned toward the deeper forest, as if it already knew the way. Together they stepped into the falling snow, two souls led by wind and memory, walking toward the place where heaven had hidden something worth finding. The snow returned by morning, slow, steady, and quiet as sleep. Elias and the dog moved together through the forest, their footprints vanishing almost as soon as they were made. The air smelled of wet bark and cold stone. Every breath felt thick, like he was inhaling the memory of the mountains themselves. The dog kept just ahead of him, tail low, head turning every few steps to be sure the boy still followed. It no longer flinched when Elias spoke, nor growled when he drew near. A strange kind of trust had begun to form, not born of kindness but of need. Two beings, half-starved and half-lost, learning how to survive in the same silence. At midday, they found shelter beneath a rocky overhang. Moss clung to the stone like old velvet, and a trickle of frozen water glimmered nearby. Elias gathered small branches, his fingers stiff and raw, until he had enough to start a fire. The dog sat beside him now, not touching, but close enough that their breaths mingled in the cold. When the flames finally caught, Elias sighed with quiet relief. The sound of crackling would fill the hollow like music. He stretched his hands toward the warmth, watching the frost melt from his gloves. The dog edged closer, eyes half closed, basking in the same fragile light. "See," Elias said softly. "We're better together." The animal tilted its head as if trying to understand the words, then gave a small huff and laid its chin on its paws. Elias smiled. He broke off a piece of bread, the last of what he had, and placed it between them. "Half for you, half for me." He waited. The dog sniffed the bread, then looked up uncertain. Elias tore his half and began to eat, slow and deliberate. After a moment, the dog followed, chewing quietly. It was the first meal they shared, meager but holy in its simplicity. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint echo, a sound like bells far away. Elias lifted his head, listening. There were no villages left here, no churches, no people to ring a bell. Yet the sound persisted, faint and haunting, woven with the sigh of the wind. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The dog's ears perked, then flattened again. It gave a low whine, uneasy. Elias stood, peering out into the gray light. The forest seemed endless, the trees leaning like old sentinels watching him pass. But deep within that silence, he could feel something, a pull gentle but insistent, like a heartbeat calling him home. He turned back to the fire. "Maybe it's trying to lead us." The dog lifted its head, studying him, then wagged its tail once, a small, deliberate movement like agreement. That night, they slept beside the fire. Elias dreamed again, of hands lighting candles, of a warm voice singing in a language older than his own. The sealed door appeared once more, the wax shimmering like gold under the flame. A voice whispered through the dream, soft and certain, "Open, and you shall remember." When he woke, the fire had died, but the ashes still glowed faintly. The dog was already awake, standing at the edge of the clearing, ears forward. Snow fell in gentle sheets, muffling every sound. Elias rose, his bones aching, and followed the dog's gaze. In the distance, through the trees, something stood out, the faint outline of stone against white. Not ruins this time, but something older. A tower half buried, its top broken and bent. Beneath it, a wall covered in ivy and frost. Elias's heart began to race. "You found it, didn't you?" The dog barked once, sharp, clear, and began to run. Elias followed, stumbling through the snow, his satchel bouncing against his side. The cold bit at his face, but excitement burned warmer than fear. As they approached, he saw the mark again, the same carved cross wrapped in vines, faint beneath the ice. He brushed it clean with his sleeve. Beneath his touch, the stone felt warm, almost alive. He stepped closer and noticed a doorway at the base of the wall, sealed shut. The same door from his dreams. He fell to his knees, breath trembling. The wax seal gleamed faintly in the dim light, unbroken despite the years. Chains crossed the wood, rusted but intact. Snow had gathered in the cracks like dust on a grave. The dog stood beside him now, tail still, eyes fixed on the door. Elias placed his hand gently on the surface. "It's real," he whispered. "All this time, it's been waiting." The wind howled softly through the stones, carrying with it the faint scent of candle smoke. Elias sat back, dizzy with awe. He could feel something beyond the wood, not danger, not threat, but presence. A warmth that pulsed faintly, answering the beat of his heart. He turned to the dog, voice trembling. "We'll rest here tonight. Tomorrow we open it." The dog whined softly, circling once before curling beside him. Elias built a small fire near the base of the wall, shielding it from the wind with stones. The light flickered across the door, casting strange shadows that almost seemed to move. As he sat watching, the dog pressed its head lightly against his arm. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of trust, of two wanderers who had chosen to keep walking together, no matter what waited behind that sealed wood. Elias laid his hand on the animal's fur, feeling its heartbeat under his palm. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not leaving." Outside, the night deepened. Snow whispered down through the trees, covering the ruins in silence. And as the fire dimmed, the faintest light seemed to glow from beneath the cracks of the sealed door, soft, golden, almost human. Elias didn't see it, but the dog did. It lifted its head, watching the light flicker and fade, and for a moment, just a moment, it wagged its tail as if recognizing something divine. Morning came pale and silver, stretching long fingers of light through the trees. Frost clung to every branch like glass, and each breath hung in the air before disappearing into the hush. Elias woke to the soft sound of snow shifting above him, flakes sliding from the ledge, whispering down like falling feathers. The fire had gone out sometime during the night, leaving only gray ash. He sat up slowly, his joints stiff, his breath visible. Beside him, the dog stirred, yawning quietly, its fur dusted white. Then Elias remembered. The door. He turned toward it, the same heavy wood, the same rusted chains. But in the fragile light of morning, it looked different. The wax along its edges shimmered faintly, as if reflecting light that wasn't there. Beneath it, the snow had melted in a perfect half-circle, revealing stone too warm to freeze. He stood and stepped closer. His boots crunched softly against the frost. The air around the door felt thick, not with cold, but with presence. It was as if the space itself was breathing, slow and patient. The boy reached out and laid his palm against the wood. It pulsed faintly beneath his touch, warm like skin. He drew back, startled. The dog gave a low growl, not in anger, but in recognition, as if it too felt the strange heartbeat echoing from within. "What are you?" Elias whispered. The wind offered no answer, but the trees rustled gently, snow drifting down from their boughs. The sound reminded him of whispers in a chapel, hundreds of small prayers spoken all at once. He studied the seal again. Thick, golden wax, unbroken despite the years. Someone had pressed a mark into it long ago, a circle with rays like a sun. The sight of it stirred something in him, something deep and ancient, like a word half-remembered. He knelt before the door, brushing away the frost at its base. There, half buried in the snow, was an iron key, old, blackened, shaped like a cross. His breath caught. It didn't look placed there. It looked left. Elias hesitated. His hand hovered above it, trembling. Then he picked it up. The metal was cold, but it felt right in his hand. Not foreign, not strange, but familiar, as though it had been waiting for him alone. The dog whined softly, stepping back. Elias looked into its dark eyes and whispered, "I have to." He rose to his feet and studied the door again. The keyhole was hidden behind one of the rusted locks. He pressed the key into it and felt a soft click, a sound so faint it might have been the breaking of ice in spring. He turned it slowly. The chain loosened, one link falling away with a dull clang. Then the wax seal began to melt. Not drip, melt, as if an unseen fire had touched it from within. The golden wax ran down the wood in slow rivulets, glowing faintly as it fell. The air filled with a scent Elias hadn't known in years. Frankincense, cedar, and something sweet like honey. The boy staggered back, shielding his face from the sudden warmth that poured through the cracks. The dog barked once, then fell silent, tail tucked, ears flat. The light that escaped through the seams wasn't harsh. It was soft, gold as dawn. Elias's heart thundered in his chest. He thought of his mother's words again. The Lord keeps what the world forgets. He pressed his hands together, not quite praying, not quite trembling. "Please," he whispered. "If there's something inside, let it be good." The wind stilled completely. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. And then, with a long, deep sigh, the door began to open. The chains fell one by one, each landing with a hollow echo. The hinges groaned, ancient, reluctant, and a thin shaft of light broke through the darkness beyond. Elias raised a hand to his face, squinting. At first, he saw only dust, swirling, golden, alive. Then shapes began to form through the light, the outline of an altar, rows of stone benches, candles that somehow still burned. The scent of wax and smoke grew stronger, warm and holy. The boy stepped forward. His boots sank into the soft ash covering the floor. The dog followed behind him, ears perked, nose twitching. The air inside was warmer, impossibly so, as if winter could not touch this place. Elias stopped at the doorway, heart pounding. Before him stretched a small underground chapel, untouched by time. The walls glowed faintly with embedded crystals, reflecting the candlelight in soft ripples. On the altar lay a book, bound in leather, edges gilded with gold that hadn't dulled. He took a step forward, then another. The sound of his breathing echoed softly off the stone. As he approached the altar, he noticed carvings along the wall, words in a language he couldn't read, but whose rhythm he somehow understood. A prayer, perhaps, or a promise. He touched the book gently. The cover was warm like living skin. He opened it slowly, the hinges creaking, the pages glowing faintly with light. Inside, the writing flowed like song, impossible to decipher, but beautiful to behold. And there, between two pages, lay something small, a folded letter sealed with red wax. His fingers trembled as he lifted it. The seal bore the same sun-shaped mark as the door. He turned it over and saw his own name written in careful faded ink. Elias. He dropped the letter in shock. It fluttered to the ground like a falling leaf. His heart stopped, then raced faster. "No," he whispered, voice breaking. "How could?" He knelt, picked it up again with shaking hands. The edges were brittle, the paper yellowed with age. But the name was clear. His name, written as though by someone who knew him long before he was born. He stared at it for a long time, the silence pressing around him. The dog stood beside him, tail still, eyes fixed on the glowing altar. The boy's voice broke the hush. "Who are you?" From somewhere deep within the chapel came a faint sound. Not a voice, not yet, just the echo of something stirring like a breath after long sleep. The candles flickered, their flames bending toward him. Elias clutched the letter to his chest. He didn't know whether to run or to kneel. The door stood open, yet Elias did not enter again. He had fled the light. When the wax melted and his name appeared on the letter, something inside him broke, not from terror, but from the unbearable nearness of something he could not understand. He stumbled back through the snow, falling to his knees a few paces from the chapel's threshold. His breath came fast, ragged, visible in the freezing air. The dog ran beside him, whining softly. Now, as night fell, Elias sat by the dying fire, staring at the door. It glowed faintly in the dark, not from flame, but from the quiet, golden breath that still seeped through its cracks. It pulsed in rhythm with his own heartbeat, as if calling him back, whispering, "Come see what waits inside." He could not. Not yet. The mountains around him seemed to lean closer as the light faded. The sky was full of gray fire, low clouds that caught the last traces of dusk, glowing faintly orange before surrendering to black. The wind had gone still. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Elias took the letter from his satchel. He turned it over and over in his hands, tracing his name with a finger. The ink looked old, written by someone long gone. But how could that be? How could his name have been waiting here, sealed in wax before he was even born? He wanted to throw it into the fire, to let it burn and end the torment of not knowing, but he couldn't. Something sacred lived in the very paper. It was as though the letter had been written for him, not just to him. The dog shifted beside him, laying its head on his leg. Elias rested his hand on its fur. The warmth of the animal's body was grounding, a simple, living comfort in the middle of mystery. He spoke aloud, softly. "I don't understand. I only wanted to survive the winter. I didn't come here for miracles." His voice cracked on the last word. It sounded strange in the stillness, a fragile thing that might break if he spoke too loud. He looked up at the stars, faint and cold above the treetops. His breath rose toward them like smoke. "Are you watching?" he asked the sky. "Did you bring me here?" There was no answer, only the distant crackle of the fire and the dog's steady breathing. Yet deep down, beneath the fear and hunger and exhaustion, something moved, a quiet certainty, soft as snow. He closed his eyes and began to pray. Not with words, but with silence. He remembered his mother's voice. "When you don't know what to ask for, just listen. God speaks best when we stop trying to fill the silence." So he listened. The forest whispered softly around him. Branches groaned under the weight of snow. Somewhere far off, a night bird called once, then fell silent. The fire dimmed, shrinking into red embers that pulsed like a heartbeat. Minutes passed. Or hours. He couldn't tell. And then, faint at first, came the sound. A hum. Low and distant, like a choir far beneath the earth. It wasn't music, not exactly, but harmony. Gentle, deep, unending. Elias lifted his head, eyes wide. The sound came from the chapel. The light behind the door brightened, spilling across the snow. It bathed the trees in gold, painted the dog's fur like fire. Elias rose slowly to his feet, the letter still in his hand. The hum grew clearer, now a song of voices woven together, rising and falling like the sea. He took one step forward. Then another. The dog barked once, softly as if warning him, or perhaps blessing him. Elias stopped a few paces from the entrance. The glow warmed his face, and in that warmth he felt something break open inside him. The part of the soul that remembers joy even in sorrow. Tears stung his eyes. He looked down at the letter again. The seal had cracked. He hadn't opened it. But the wax had split on its own, as if time itself had decided it was ready. Hands trembling, he unfolded the paper. Inside, the ink was faded, but the words were clear enough to read in the golden light. "To the child who finds this place, you are not lost. You were never forgotten. This light waits for those who carry love through the ruins. Do not fear the door. What you seek has always been within you." Elias's lips parted, but no sound came. The paper slipped from his hands, carried by the wind into the snow. He fell to his knees, shaking. It wasn't just a message. It was a reminder. His mother's lullaby returned to him, not as memory, but as song. It rose from somewhere deep inside, carried on breath and heartbeat. He began to hum, softly at first, then louder, matching the tone of the unseen choir beneath the ground. The air shimmered. The dog pressed close to his side, tail curled around him. Elias whispered, "Tomorrow we'll open it completely. Not tonight. I have to believe first." The forest stirred, a single gust of wind sweeping through the clearing, scattering embers into the dark. One landed on his coat and vanished in smoke, like a small star dying in his lap. He smiled faintly through the tears. "Thank you," he said to the silence, "for letting me be afraid." The door's light dimmed again as if resting. The hum faded to nothing. And so, wrapped in shadow and gold, Elias lay down beside the dog. The fire's last ember glowed between them, the only light the night allowed. By the time sleep came, he was no longer trembling. He dreamed not of war or loss, but of warmth, a field in spring, his mother's hand on his hair, the sound of bells carried by wind. The boy slept. The dog watched. And the door, waiting in the dark, pulsed once, a heartbeat echoing the rhythm of the world beginning again. When dawn came, it came gently, not with color or song, but with stillness. The snow had stopped. The trees stood motionless, their branches heavy with white, their shadows long and gray. Even the wind seemed afraid to disturb what was about to happen. Elias woke before the sun fully rose. The fire was gone, only faint smoke rising from its ashes. The dog still lay beside him, one paw twitching in dreams. For a moment, Elias watched the slow rise and fall of its chest. Then he looked toward the chapel. The door still glowed. Faintly, like the last ember in a hearth that refuses to die. He rose quietly, brushing snow from his coat. His fingers were stiff, but his heart felt strangely steady. The fear that had gripped him the night before was gone, not replaced by courage but by peace. A quiet knowing that whatever waited beyond that door had been waiting for him all along. He took the letter, now creased and soft from his hands, and tucked it into his pocket. "Come," he whispered to the dog. The animal lifted its head, blinked, then stood and followed, tail low but wagging once, slow and sure. They approached the chapel together. Each step crunched in the frozen snow, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. Frost glittered on the chains that had fallen to the ground, like jewels abandoned by time. Elias placed his hand on the wood again. It was warm, warmer than before, and the faint pulse beneath it matched his own heartbeat. He took a deep breath and pushed. The hinges groaned, slow and ancient. The door opened without resistance, as if it had merely been waiting for his hand. A soft gust of warm air flowed outward, brushing his face like a sigh. The scent of candles, cedar, and thyme filled the air. Elias stepped inside. Light poured around him, not blinding but soft like dawn through clouds. The air shimmered faintly, dust motes dancing in gold. The dog hesitated at the threshold, whining softly, then followed him in. The chapel was exactly as he had left it. Small, carved from stone, lined with candles that burned without melting. The air was warm enough to make his breath disappear. Yet something new lingered, a hum just beyond hearing, like a heartbeat in the walls. Elias moved toward the altar. The golden book still lay open, its pages glowing faintly. The words shifted and shimmered, unreadable yet alive. He placed his hand on the leather cover and closed his eyes. A whisper rose around him. Not from the walls, but from within. "You came back." Elias's eyes snapped open. The voice was gentle, neither man nor woman but something between. It felt familiar, like the echo of a lullaby. He looked around, heart pounding. "Who's there?" The voice answered softly, "You know." He turned in a slow circle. The light around the altar thickened, taking shape, a figure forming not from flesh but from radiance. It was neither ghost nor human, but something holy, the suggestion of hands, a face made of light, eyes that carried both sorrow and infinite kindness. Elias froze. The dog pressed close against his leg, silent, unmoving. "Why my name?" he whispered. "How did you know me?" The figure stepped closer, or seemed to, and the warmth of its presence wrapped around him like a blanket. The candles flickered but did not waver. "Because I was with you," it said. "When you hid in the cellar. When you ran through fire. When you sang though no one heard. You were never alone. Elias shook his head, tears stinging his eyes. But everyone left. Everyone. The light pulsed softly, as if in sorrow. No one who is loved is ever truly gone. Their prayers became this place. Their hope made this light. It waited for someone who would still believe. Elias stared, unable to speak. The warmth filled his chest, pressing against the ache he had carried for so long. For the first time it didn't hurt, it healed. The figure extended what might have been a hand, its glow trembling like candlelight. Open the book, Elias. He obeyed. The pages turned on their own, stopping on a passage written in a language he did not know, yet somehow understood. The door to the heart is sealed by fear. It opens only to those who enter with love. Elias read it aloud, his voice echoing softly through the chamber. As he spoke, the room grew brighter. The walls shimmered, the floor beneath him trembling like the surface of water. The figure's voice whispered once more, "The door you opened is not of stone or wood. It is of faith. And now it is open in you." And then, as gently as it had appeared, the light began to fade. Elias reached forward, desperate to keep it near. "Wait, please, don't go." But the light only smiled, or perhaps that was the way it felt. "I'm not going. I'm home." The glow dissolved into the air, scattering like dust in sunlight. The warmth lingered, resting against his skin, his heart, his breath. Elias stood still for a long time. The dog pressed against his side, tail sweeping the floor once, twice. He whispered, "Thank you." Then he sank to his knees before the altar, resting his forehead against the cold stone, and wept, not from grief, but from the unbearable weight of grace. Outside, the wind began to rise again. Snow swirled through the air, soft and slow. But inside, the chapel remained untouched, a place beyond winter. The candles burned brighter now. The chains at the door had vanished, as if they had never been. Elias stayed there until the light from the outside world began to fade again. When he finally stood, something had changed in him. His shoulders no longer bent beneath invisible weight. His eyes no longer searched the horizon for what was gone. He placed his hand on the dog's head. "Let's go," he said. "There's warmth enough to share." Together they stepped back into the snow, not away from the light, but carrying it with them. Behind them, the door closed softly on its own, sealing not with chains, but with peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us reach our dream of 1,000 hearts who still believe that miracles can be found in the smallest places. The next morning came without sound. No birds, no wind, no motion in the trees. The mountain seemed to be holding its breath, as though the whole world knew that somewhere deep within its heart, something holy had awakened. Elias stood at the door once more, his hand resting lightly on the wood. The dog sat beside him, tail brushing the snow, ears forward and still. The boy hesitated, not from fear, but from reverence. He could feel warmth through the door, gentle as breath against his palm. He looked at the dog and smiled faintly. "You ready?" The animal tilted its head, then stood. Together, they stepped once more into the chapel. It was brighter than before, not by fire or flame, but by something deeper, a golden glow that seemed to rise from the stone itself. The walls breathed light, their surfaces rippling faintly, as though made of living honey. Elias's boots left soft prints in the ash that covered the floor. When he looked back, he saw them slowly fade, the ash reforming undisturbed. He whispered, "It's alive." The dog moved quietly at his side, its paws making no sound at all. Its reflection shimmered faintly in the golden light, as though the glow itself recognized the life within the creature. Elias walked deeper into the chamber. The air grew warmer, thicker, filled with the faint scent of oil, incense, and something floral, like spring. He noticed new things he hadn't before. The ceiling above, painted in faint frescoes half erased by time. Angels, stars, rivers of light. The altar carved from marble, worn smooth by centuries of hands. Small clay vessels lined the edges of the room, each filled with oil that burned without smoke or flame. He knelt beside one and lifted it carefully. Inside, the oil shimmered like liquid sunlight. It pulsed faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat. He whispered, "How long have you been waiting here?" A flicker of warmth passed through his fingertips. Not pain, but recognition. He set the vessel back down, then turned to the far end of the room, where a second door stood half open. This one was smaller, shaped in an arch of carved stone. The carvings along its frame were intricate. Vines, wheat, and a single lamb lying beside a flame. The dog went first, slipping through the opening. Elias followed, his hand brushing the stone as he passed. The light shifted immediately. Softer now, more intimate, like candlelight reflected off still water. The room beyond was smaller, almost circular. Shelves carved into the walls held simple objects, things of the world above. A wooden cup, a torn cloak, a child's shoe. Each one rested as though placed there by loving hands. Elias approached them slowly. Dust did not cling to these things. They looked as though someone had laid them down only moments ago. He touched the cloak. It was soft, impossibly so for something so old. Beneath it, he found a small scrap of paper. The handwriting was faint but legible. "What we leave in love is never lost." He closed his eyes. The words settled deep inside him, like seeds finding soil. He looked around again. There were more notes, tucked under objects, pinned to the walls, folded between cracks of stone. Each one written in a different hand, but all carrying the same truth in different words. We believed. Light will return. Remember us not with sorrow, but with faith. Elias read them all slowly, as though gathering the pieces of a prayer left unfinished. The dog lay down in the center of the room, its eyes half closed, peaceful. Then Elias noticed a faint glow coming from beneath a slab of stone at the far end. He approached it carefully. The glow pulsed softly, golden, rhythmic, alive. He knelt and brushed away dust until he found words engraved along the edge. "Here rests the last flame. Keep it burning." His hands trembled. He looked at the dog, who watched silently, then back at the stone. With effort, he lifted the slab just enough to see beneath it. Inside, resting in a shallow hollow, was a single candle. Impossibly small, impossibly bright. It burned with a flame that never wavered. The wax did not melt. The air around it shimmered faintly, warm and alive. Elias bowed his head. He didn't understand, and yet he did. This was what the door had protected. Not gold, not relics, but a promise. He whispered, "The world forgot you, but you never forgot the world." He sat beside the candle for a long time. The warmth touched his skin, then seeped into him, filling every space that grief had hollowed out. He closed his eyes and began to hum, the lullaby again, the same one his mother used to sing. The candle flickered, answering his song like a heartbeat. The room grew brighter. The dog lifted its head, eyes glowing in the golden light. It wagged its tail once, then rested its chin on its paws, content. When Elias opened his eyes again, the candle's flame had grown, not larger but deeper, as though it had entered him. He could feel it behind his ribs now, burning softly, endlessly. He whispered, "I'll keep it. I promise." And when he stood, something extraordinary happened. The glow of the room began to fade, not into darkness, but into him. The walls, the shelves, the altar, the light itself seemed to fold inward, vanishing like breath into his chest. The chamber emptied. The candle beneath the stone went out. But Elias still felt the warmth, alive and pulsing, within his heart. He looked around one last time. The room was bare stone now, silent and gray. Only the scent of cedar remained, faint, sweet, eternal. He turned toward the dog and smiled. "Let's go home." As they stepped through the doorway, the light that clung to him trailed behind, faint and golden, touching the walls one last time before vanishing into stillness. Outside, the mountain waited beneath a perfect, endless sky. Elias stood at the entrance and breathed deeply. The cold no longer stung. The wind no longer bit. Everything felt awake. The boy and the dog walked down through the forest together, leaving behind footprints that glowed faintly before fading back into snow. And somewhere beneath the earth, unseen but eternal, the last flame rested, not extinguished but carried. The forest felt different now. Alive, as if it had been sleeping for centuries and was only just waking to breathe again. The air shimmered faintly where Elias passed, warmed by something unseen. The dog trotted beside him, silent but content, its fur glowing with hints of gold where sunlight touched it. They walked without speaking for a long while. The snow was softer now, not the sharp, biting kind of winter, but the forgiving snow that falls when spring is near. Elias's footprints lingered longer than before, as though even the ground wanted to remember him. He carried no fire, yet the air around him was warm. The candle's flame still lived within his chest. When they reached the clearing where the ruins began, Elias stopped. The chapel stood behind them, quiet and whole again, though he knew that when he left, it had been only stone and shadow. Now it glowed faintly, as if the mountain itself had taken breath and built a heart around it. He turned toward it, placing a hand on his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. And that was when he heard it, a faint sound so delicate it might have been wind at first. But the tone was too measured, too intentional. Words began to form in the air, not spoken, not sung, but remembered. "Elias." The boy froze. The dog raised its head, ears flicking forward. The voice came not from outside, but from within, like the echo of a dream returning. It was a woman's voice, gentle, warm, familiar. He closed his eyes. "Mother." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of lavender and smoke. The same scent that had once clung to her clothes. The same scent he had dreamed of 1,000 times. "You have found what we kept," the voice said, soft as snow falling on water. "The light that never dies." Elias's throat tightened. "It was you. All of us," she said. "Those who believed that even in ruin, love must be kept alive. We sealed the light so that when the world grew cold, someone pure enough to carry it would come." He sank to his knees, tears burning down his cheeks. The dog pressed close beside him, whining softly. "We prayed for the one who would find the flame," the voice continued. "Every name lost in the fire, every song silenced, every soul that fell into shadow. We poured our hope into that light. And now it lives in you." Elias pressed his hand to his chest. He could feel it, the warmth steady and sure, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "But why me?" The answer came like a smile carried on wind. "Because you never stopped believing in kindness, even when no one was kind. Because you shared your last bread with a creature the world had forgotten. Because you sang when there was no one to hear." He bowed his head. The snow beneath him melted in a small circle, revealing earth. Dark, rich, breathing. "You were the smallest light," his mother's voice said. "And that was enough for heaven to find you." He couldn't speak. The words lodged in his throat, too sacred for sound. For a while, he simply knelt there, the wind swirling around him, the scent of lavender growing stronger. Then, slowly, other voices began to join hers. Faint at first, then many. Men, women, children. All speaking at once, their tones blending into a harmony older than language. They spoke not in words, but in remembrance. He understood them without understanding. They spoke of hunger and war, of faith and loss, of light hidden in darkness and love that refused to die. Each voice touched him like a hand on his shoulder, soft and real. He felt their warmth, their forgiveness, their peace. The dog lifted its head and howled once, a sound not of fear but of mourning. The voices answered it with silence so complete it became music. Elias raised his face to the sky. Snow fell gently onto his eyelashes, melting as it touched the heat of his skin. He whispered, "I'll carry you. All of you." The voices faded one by one, returning to the stillness of the earth. But the last to go, his mother's, lingered. "Elias," she said, her tone soft as a prayer, "light is not kept by holding it. It is kept by giving it away. Go now. Where there is darkness, bring warmth. Where there is silence, sing." And then she was gone. The wind sighed, long and low, then stilled. The forest exhaled. The mountain returned to its calm. Elias opened his eyes. The world looked different. Not brighter but more alive. The snow shimmered faintly, each flake catching light as though it remembered the sun. He stood, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. The dog nudged his leg and barked once, as if to say, "It's time." Elias smiled. Yes, it's time. He looked back one last time. The chapel was gone. In its place, only snow, smooth, untouched, as if the mountain had hidden the secret once more. But he didn't feel loss. He felt full. He began to walk. With every step, warmth spread outward from his chest, leaving faint trails of golden mist in the air. The dog followed, tail wagging. Somewhere in the distance, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time that winter. The light spilled across the valley, touching the ruins, the trees, the silent fields. The world looked as though it were remembering how to hope again. At first, it was only warmth. As Elias and the dog descended from the mountain, the air began to soften. The sharp edge of winter eased. The snow underfoot turned from brittle ice to powder that whispered with each step. When the sun rose above the ridge, it broke across the world like breath over glass. Elias stopped halfway down the slope and turned to look back. The mountain behind him shone white and gold. There was no sign of the chapel. Not even ruins, not even shadow. But he could feel it there, deep beneath the stone, resting like a heartbeat in the bones of the earth. The dog nudged his leg, urging him forward. Its eyes caught the light, amber and knowing. Elias smiled faintly. All right, let's go. As they moved through the valley, the snow began to change. Where his boots pressed the ground, small patches of earth appeared, dark and alive. Tiny green shoots rose through the frost, bending toward him as though drawn to warmth. At first, he didn't notice. He was humming softly, the lullaby that had followed him through dream and ruin. But when the dog barked once, circling ahead, he looked down and saw it, a trail of life following his steps. His breath caught. He took another step. More shoots. A blade of grass. Then two. The flame in his chest pulsed gently, not bright but deep, steady as the rhythm of his heart. He pressed a hand against his coat and whispered, "It's you, isn't it?" The warmth answered in silence, in presence. He didn't try to understand. He simply kept walking. By noon, the air carried the scent of thawing soil. The snow on the trees melted in droplets that sparkled as they fell. Streams long frozen began to move again, breaking their thin cages of ice with soft cracks. The sound was faint but unmistakable, the first song of a world remembering itself. Elias knelt by the water's edge, cupping his hands to drink. The cold stung his palms, but the taste was sweet, alive. He laughed quietly, and the sound startled him. It was the kind of laugh he hadn't made since before the war. Bright, unguarded, almost holy. The dog barked again, tail wagging furiously. It ran ahead, splashing through the melting snow, chasing a single bird that had appeared from nowhere. A sparrow, wings catching sunlight. Elias followed, his boots sinking into the softening earth. Everywhere they passed, color returned, faint at first, then certain. Moss spread over stone. Frost gave way to wildflowers too early for their season. Even the air changed, filling with the quiet hum of renewal. Elias slowed, overcome. He looked at his hands, at the light flickering faintly beneath his skin. "What am I now?" he whispered. A breeze stirred through the valley, warm, fragrant, carrying a whisper that might have been answer, a keeper. He closed his eyes and let the wind pass through him. For the first time, he did not feel small. He did not feel lost. He felt placed, as though every sorrow, every hunger, every lonely night had been a step toward this. He opened his eyes. Ahead lay the ruins of another village. Smaller than the one before, its roofs collapsed, its chimneys hollow. He hesitated. The dog barked once and ran forward, tail high. "All right," Elias said softly. "One more." They entered what remained of the square. The same silence greeted them, but it was a silence full of waiting, not despair. Elias knelt beside a fallen wall and brushed away the snow. Beneath it, he found a wooden toy, a little horse with one wheel missing. He turned it in his hand, then placed it upright on the stone. The warmth inside him stirred, and a faint glow spread from his fingers into the toy. The wood brightened, its cracks closing, its color returning. When he stepped back, the little horse rolled forward once, a single, soundless motion as if bowing in thanks. Elias smiled through his tears. He walked through the ruins, touching what he could, a doorframe, a window, a broken bell. Each time, the same quiet miracle. Warmth, then life. Not resurrection, not magic, but remembrance. The world remembering how to be whole. By the time the sun began to fall, the valley was no longer gray. It glowed faintly gold, as if someone had painted it with light from within. The dog curled near the fire they built that night, its fur clean, its breathing deep. Elias sat beside it, watching the stars emerge one by one. He whispered, "Mother, they'll see it now. They'll know the light's still here." Somewhere far away, bells began to ring, faint, echoing through the mountains. Not ghostly, not imagined, but real. Elias listened, smiling. The dog lifted its head and barked softly, tail sweeping the earth. The boy laughed quietly. "Yes," he said. "They're awake." He leaned back against the stones and looked up at the sky. The stars shone clearer than he'd ever seen, bright as the candles beneath the earth. One of them flickered, just once, like a heartbeat. Elias closed his eyes. The warmth in his chest pulsed gently, joining the rhythm of the world. He was no longer cold, no longer hungry, no longer lost. He was a bearer of the flame, and the night around him glowed because of it. Night had settled softly over the valley. No smoke rose from the ruins anymore, only mist, pale and slow, winding through the stones like a sigh. The wind that once howled through empty houses now moved like a gentle hymn, carrying the scent of thawing earth and pine. Elias sat by his fire, small, steady, no larger than the palm of his hand. The dog lay beside him, sleeping with its nose against his knee. Above them, stars shimmered like scattered prayers. He didn't know how many days had passed since he opened the door. The world had begun to move differently. Slower, kinder. The cold still lingered, but it no longer felt cruel. He had learned that not every silence is emptiness. Sometimes it is simply the pause before a blessing. He reached for his satchel and pulled out the folded letter. The edges were frayed now, the ink nearly faded, but the words still glowed faintly under starlight. "You were never forgotten." He traced the letters with a trembling finger and smiled. "I believe you now," he whispered. "All of you." The wind shifted, soft as breath against his cheek. Not answer, not sound, just presence. He looked around at what had once been a dead world. Now, even in darkness, he could see it living. Faint trails of gold beneath the snow where he had walked, the soft shimmer of grass beneath frost, the quiet pulse of life returning. The light was spreading, slow and sure, like the dawn learning how to walk again. Elias tilted his head toward the stars. "They'll come," he said softly. "Others will find the door. Maybe not soon. Maybe long after I'm gone. But they'll find it." The dog stirred, opening one sleepy eye. Elias reached down and stroked its head. "You'll see them first, won't you?" The animal's tail thumped once, a sound that broke the stillness like laughter in a church. Elias chuckled. "Yes, you will." For a while they sat in silence, watching the fire burn lower. The warmth in his chest pulsed gently, the eternal flame he had promised to keep. It didn't blaze. It didn't roar. It glowed softly, perfectly, like peace made visible. He thought of his mother, her voice in the garden, her hands breaking bread. He remembered her words, "When the world forgets you, remember the world." He had spent so long afraid of being forgotten. Now he understood that to be remembered by heaven, one must first remember others, even the lost, even the ruins, especially the ruins. He lifted a small stick from the fire, watching the ember glow at its tip. Then he pressed it into the ground beside him. The snow hissed, then softened. Beneath it, a single green shoot emerged, fragile but alive. The boy smiled. "There you are." The stars seemed to lean closer, their light trembling like candles in a vast cathedral. Elias closed his eyes and whispered the last prayer he had. "Thank you for the cold that taught me warmth. Thank you for the silence that taught me song. And thank you for the door that waited." He sat for a long time after that, until the fire burned down to embers and the dog's breathing grew deep and steady beside him. When sleep finally took him, it was not the restless kind he had known before. It was light, soft and clean, like falling into grace. And if anyone had passed through the valley that night, they might have seen a faint glow, a golden thread stretching from the boy's fire to the stars, pulsing gently, as if the heavens themselves had found their reflection on earth. The ruins were no longer empty. They had become a sanctuary again. The smallest flame had kept its promise. And in that quiet, endless mountain night, the world began, once more, to hope. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where in the world you are listening from. It's our dream to reach 1,000 hearts who still believe that light survives even in the darkest places, that compassion, faith, and small acts of love can rebuild what war and sorrow tried to erase. Because sometimes all it takes is one child, one dog, and one forgotten door to remind us the light was never gone. It was only waiting to be found.